Oh, come on. Hey, good morning, princess. How are ya? Hope you're doing well. I wish there was a way I could. West Virginia Mountain Mama, how are you, darling? Welcome in, welcome in. Give me 1 second. Please and thank you. Try and maybe perhaps make this a little bit more. Jim, good morning, darling. How are ya? Good morning and welcome in. Let me know that you can hear me all right. And let me know if this is better for the comments. I've never tried anything like this, but I feel like it might be easier to read the comments with a little backdrop. We can hear. All right. Okay, so I've been promising a video on abortion during our little cultural appropriation debate last week. I also touched on it, kind of briefly once we went way off topic, which was fine, and squirreled all the way into pretty much everything based, if you will. Thank you guys. And I have been wanting to react particularly to this specific video. I did like 10 minutes of it on a live forever ago. I didn't hardly have but like 60 subscribers maybe, so it wasn't really exposed to a lot of people. Oh Lord, here comes Loki. And I just kind of have been wanting to redo it anyway. And lately, I've been in much debate in one chat or another for one reason or another. And I just kind of felt compelled to really talk about it, I guess you could say, and kind of share my own take, I guess, hot take. The mass ritualistic murder of the unborn is wrong, and I don't support it. I wasn't always of that mindset. People are allowed to grow and change, especially when you learn new information. That's what you're supposed to do. And I think one of the biggest injustices perpetrated on our youth, and especially our young women, is that the liberal leftists want you to believe that these things, quote unquote things, are just clumps of cells and completely unsentient and therefore don't matter and therefore are not worthy of love and life, right? However, I have a really interesting video after this first. I have two very interesting videos we're going to react to today. The first one is the history of Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood. I think everyone that supports Planned Parenthood should see this. I think before any woman has an abortion, she should have to watch this, or at least a short, compiling the biggest forms of information, because a lot of people don't understand that Margaret Sanger, who's the founder of Planned Parenthood, was in fact a eugenicist that Hitler admired. Literally. Okay? A lot of people don't realize this. The whole reason she created Planned Parenthood and the whole reason she started the first ones in the inner cities was because she wanted to eliminate the black race and other people of color. So when we really come back to this is where Planned Parenthood started and then move from there, I think that's really when we start having an honest discussion. Because we can't just start, at even 1990. We got to go all the way back to the beginning to understand the real roots of the evil, right? So that's what the first video is about. And then the second video is actually and ex-abortionists. I watch a lot of content from doctors who, yes, West Virginia Mountain Mama, thank you for being here. I think it's a really important conversation. I think a lot of people just spew opinions of their own that they've been parroted, by the completely liberal left. Thank you, Daddy. And they don't really get the truth. And of course, the liberal leftists and the far, far left agenda doesn't want you to know things like people who perform abortions do have regret, do turn into pro-life advocates. People who have abortion have regret. And there are even people who survive abortions who go on to be pro-life advocates and are lucky to be alive. The left doesn't want you to know this, just like they don't want you to know that there are kids who they've transitioned and sterilized who regret it, like Jazz Jennings, who will never have an orgasm, who will never have a child because she's been sterilized, and who will never live a life that he was meant to live, right? That's the kind of thing that the far left agenda doesn't want you to know. And I think the only way we can really have these conversations is to bring those dark things to the light before we really can talk about it. So I'm going to play some of this. Yep, that's exactly correct, Mountain Mama. That's exactly correct. And the only way that we can combat those things is to show the truth. And so I'm not gonna... I know I made a snarky comment about the mass murder of our unborn earlier, but what I would like this video to become is a sort of video you could send somebody that has a lot of information, that has a lot of facts, that you can possibly even change somebody's mind. Maybe you can bring somebody to our pro-life side with this video. This is not going to be a hateful video. Like I said, I know I made a snide comment in the beginning. Sorry for it. Moving forward, we're going to go forward with only love and light and positivity, because I do want to make a space where people can be heard, but hopefully have an open enough mind to be able to have their ideas challenged. And that's what I hope this video will bring. That's the premise. And thank you so much, Mountain Mama, for being with us today. I appreciate you, and Jim. That's exactly right, Mountain Mama. Or even just plant a seed. Sometimes all you can do is plant a seed for the time being, and eventually the seed will grow. So, let's plant some seeds. Alright, this first one is from a channel called Forgotten History. They do a lot of really interesting things on history that's maybe not forgotten, but maybe people would like to be forgotten. And this is one of my favorite videos of theirs.
Mrs. Margaret Slee, president of America's Planned Parenthood Federation, maintains that European women should stop having babies for the next 10 years.
But Mrs. Slee, in this country, having babies is the only thing left which is both unrationed and untaxed. Do you think we really ought to stop?
Well, I suppose a subject like that is really so personal that it's entirely up to the parents to decide. But from my view, I believe that there should be no more babies.
The term eugenics is basically a set of beliefs and practices that aim to improve the genetic quality of a human population. Historically, by excluding people and groups judged to be inferior and promoting those judged to be superior. There have been various applications of eugenics, perhaps the most famous being the Germans before and during World War II, which was condemned by the Nuremberg war crimes trials. But the Germans did not invent eugenics. In fact, they were inspired by the founder of the taxpayer-funded Planned Parenthood. The truth behind the genesis of that organization and its founder are much darker than most Americans realize. Who was the real Margaret Sanger? Why was she heralded by the Third Reich as the greatest socialist in America? Why do modern Democrats who claim to support the African American population justify presenting her as a cultural icon? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, a veteran of the United States Army and Marine Corps, former history professor, book author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. Margaret Sanger was born on September 14, 1879 in Corning, New York. She is an icon to left-wing groups due to her founding of Planned Parenthood in October of 1916 with her sister Ethel Byrne and Fanny Amendel, which was the first birth control clinic in Brownsville, Brooklyn, New York. 9 days later, the police raided the clinic and arrested all the people involved for promoting birth control, which was illegal. Sanger refused to pay the fine and spent 30 days in jail. She then traveled the country preaching her concepts. Sanger then founded the American Birth Control League in 1921. Sanger also endorsed the 1927 decision Buck v. Bell, in which the Supreme Court ruled that states could forcibly sterilize people deemed unfit without their consent and sometimes without their knowledge. This American law would be the major defense at Nuremberg for the Nazi defendants who were doctors practicing Sanger's methods, and many would be found not guilty as a result of this defense.
I really want us to just take a moment and really hear that again, right, in our heads. I mean, I'm not going to rewind it. She helped author and promote this bill. Well, it was a decision from the Supreme Court. It was a whole thing, but this movement, shall we say, that allows whoever's deemed unfit, right? Because it's all relative. It's on a spectrum. So at the end of the day, what really is unfit, correct? So whatever authority this is, in this case was the courts, deem this person unfit for this reason, or for one reason or another. In this particular case, it was, I believe, Down syndrome, or mental illness. I think Emma Buck was mentally ill. There was another famous one of a woman with Down syndrome. But regardless, for whatever reason they decide, they could then forcibly or unknowingly sterilize these people, right? And so here we're already beginning to see a pattern with Margaret Sanger of wanting to rid the population of the quote-unquote less desirable in her eyes, right? This is the beginning of a pattern that will persist throughout her lifetime and her journey to become somebody that the loving and tolerant left hails as some kind of hero, right? Those are her roots.
In 1939, Sanger began what was called the Negro Project, alongside black leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary McLeod Bethune, and Reverend Adam Clayton Powell. This was the plan to have black doctors performing on black patients to perpetuate the sterilization of blacks who were deemed inferior, as many black patients were suspicious of white doctors. Following upon Sanger's eugenics platform, disguised...
And just real quick, I'm not going to keep stopping it, but during this part of the last video, someone specifically, I remember, commented and said, but why would black doctors promote this, right? Well, you've got to understand, within every community, especially communities that are considered minorities, there is a self-hatred that comes with that minoritization, right? A lot of these black doctors might have had some of that self-hatred, or perhaps it was purely for greed, because you have to think that these particular black doctors were making a ton of money sterilizing their own race, right? So there are many reasons, all of them evil, in my own personal opinion. These black doctors would have participated the same way women participate in the Planned Parenthood movement, for perhaps even out of some kind of goodness. Perhaps they actually did think they were helping. But a lot of people find this hard to believe. I don't really put anything past people at the end of the day, because I would like to believe people are good inherently. I've said that many times, but there are evil people in the world who perpetuate evil, like Margaret Sanger, for no other reason than it's just who they are. So I don't know that we'll ever really understand, but it cannot be stated with enough emphasis that these are facts. These are things that happen. The left tries to deny or to hide it, but I mean, this is history, right? These are things that are factually correct, things you can research on your own. You can go and, you may have to use DuckDuckGo. Google does not like to bring up a lot of this stuff, but you can absolutely find this. It's not hidden. It's just quote-unquote forgotten, right? And I wonder why.
As giving women access to birth control, the ABCL became Planned Parenthood Federation of America in 1942.
And you know what? Also a great point, Mountain Mama. You never know. Like I said, we may never really understand their motivations. But, oh, hi, Andy. Yep, that's exactly right. You know, Andy. That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Mountain Mama. It could be that they were threatened or coerced. It could be that they were given, large amounts of money and ensured their family would be taken care of in a time where that in and of itself was enough to make almost anyone do almost anything in their position, right? So, regardless, it's a fact, and that's we have to start with these very uncomfortable truths to be able to understand why I believe in my heart and soul abortion is evil. Abortion itself is evil. And I don't just believe one single act of abortion is illegal. I believe the idea, the belief system behind it, the person who created the structure to allow literally almost anyone in America to have an abortion, it's all illegal. It's all fruit of the poisonous tree, to use a legal term, right? And she's the poison. And so is everyone else that participated. But it all started with her. Like I said, that's why we're starting here. Hi. So glad you're all with us today. Thank you for being here.
Birth control was no longer considered illegal, at least among married couples. During this period, Sanger had critics and supporters. The supporters even today claim that she condemned abortion, arguing that it would not be needed if every woman had access to birth control. What they leave out is that Sanger only opposed abortions if that meant not producing the best, healthiest, most intelligent from Caucasian couples. For blacks, Jews, and brown-skinned people, as well as low IQ white people and those with birth defects, they were not to be allowed. This was what the Nazis adopted. Ironically, in
remember, those are the quote-unquote less desirables.
1966, Planned Parenthood began issuing its Margaret Sanger Awards annually to honor individuals of distinction in recognition of excellence and leadership in furthering reproductive health and reproductive rights. However, the organization very quietly and without any fanfare stopped this practice as Black Lives Matter rose to prominence. It would have been seen as the height of hypocrisy to have a liberal-backed domestic terror group that attacked white America connected to Sanger, a Democrat darling who wanted to exterminate blacks. In fact, the last recipient of the award listed on the website is Dr. Willie Parker in 2015. Then, it just quietly disappeared. Parker was an abortionist known for his contentious claims that his Christian faith influenced his work. He was accused of sexual assault in 2019, which he denied, but he still resigned from all of his professional positions in 2020. Other recipients of the Margaret Sanger Award include House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and actresses Jane Fonda and Katharine Hepburn. Margaret Sanger was one of the few women to be given an honorific title and inducted into the Ku Klux Klan, and exalted by none other than Adolf Hitler and Dr. Joseph Goebbels. She was friends with the racist Democratic President Woodrow Wilson, Democratic fundraiser, and automobile maker Henry Ford, who was also friends with Adolf Hitler and a rabid anti-Semite and hater of black Americans. Margaret Sanger's rabid racism, anti-Semitism, and violent suggestions on eliminating all non-whites from American society endeared her to the eugenics crowd. She wanted an all-white, healthy, intelligent society built upon the concept of racial eradication years before Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party were even a thought.
See, and that's one of the biggest things. I've heard people say Margaret Sanger adopted Hitler's beliefs so many times it's insane. A lot of people don't understand that Adolf Hitler and the Nazis literally adopted the beliefs of Margaret Sanger, and in fact praised her and her work, quote unquote, towards the perfect race. She came first. And it's really inconvenient for people to admit that, because then we'd really have to dig into the evil behind it. But that's what the truth is. Yes, Zionist to the extreme, 100%.
1934, the Nazi Party adopted her radical positions, with Goebbels saying, "Margaret Sanger is the best National Socialist in America." In fact, the September 15, 1935 Nuremberg laws classified races according to an insane chart drafted by Dr. Wilhelm Stuckart and Dr. Friedrich Kritzinger. The official name was the Reich Citizenship Law and the Law for the Protection of German Blood and German Honor. These laws embodied many of the racial theories underpinning Nazi ideology, which they adapted from Margaret Sanger. These laws could provide the legal framework for the systematic persecution of Jews in Germany, who at that time were deemed a race and not a religion, and the eugenics behind them were taken from the world of Sanger. In fact, her theories and opinions influenced men like SS Captain Dr. Josef Mengele, the Beast of Auschwitz, and his associates, Dr. Karl Klauberg, Dr. Hertha Oberhäuser, Hitler's personal physician, Dr. Karl Brandt, just to name a few. When Hitler authorized the Action T4 euthanasia program to murder the handicapped, mentally ill, and other undesirables from German society, the doctors and nurses were given the program directly from Margaret Sanger's own philosophy.
That's correct. Barbarians in every sense of the word, Andy. That's correct.
On August 18, 1939, the Reich Ministry of the Interior circulated a decree requiring all physicians, nurses, and midwives to report newborn infants and children under the age of 3 who showed signs of severe mental or physical disability. The man who started the program was Dr. Karl Brandt, and they were disguised as children's clinics and advertised that they would treat their abnormalities and infirmities. In fact, they were death centers where the children were quietly killed and the cause of death misrepresented as by other means such as pneumonia, tuberculosis, etc. Dr. Brandt himself claimed that Sanger's methods were most effective and if performed.
Yes, I have seen how cruel the Nazi doctors were, experimenting on humans and atrocities that I won't repeat. Indeed, I have. And Karl Brandt was one of the biggest perpetrators of such a thing, this doctor, quote unquote, and me personally, I mean, call me crazy, but that looks like the face of evil to me. I mean, am I alone in that? Maybe I'm biased because I know some of the things that he did, but that just looks like an evil, evil man. And some of those things still are perpetrated. Like, for example, a great example, abortion. I mean, there were abortion experiments, menstruation experiments. They did terrible things. And I do also find it ironic, sad and ironic, that the party who boosts this woman up as some kind of hero for reproductive rights informed the Nazis, who went on to experiment not only on blacks or Jews or anyone they deemed inferior of a different race, but also white women and low IQ, quote-unquote, mentally ill, quote-unquote, whatever they deemed to be of the undesirables in those ways as well. And it's disgusting. It's enough to make your stomach turn. The second video, however, that we're going to react to here in a moment is there's going to be a trigger warning beforehand because it's a whole lot. He does. He looks evil.
Directly or ingenious. In Sanger's own words, she peddled racism, eugenics, contraception, abortion, while demonstrating a visceral hatred for children, parenthood, marriage, and the Catholic Church. The following quotes are directly from Margaret Sanger's own writings and interviews.
Okay, I'm not going to interrupt. We're almost done with this video. It's only not even 13-minute video, but I'm not going to interrupt any of these quotes because I want the impact and the weight of these words from this vile woman to have all the necessary weight. And I think it's like 8 or 10 quotes or something like that. It's quite a few. And we're just going to listen to them without interruption because there's something else. These are all from her very own writings and or public speeches. These are proven words that came out of Margaret Sanger's mouth. They cannot be denied.
1. The most merciful thing that the large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. 2. A marriage license shall in itself give husband and wife only the right to a common household and not the right of parenthood. 3. All of our problems are the result of overbreeding among the working class. Knowledge of birth control is essentially moral. Its general, though prudent, practice must lead to a higher individuality and ultimately to a cleaner race. 4. Blacks, soldiers, and Jews are a menace to the human race. 5. The masses of Negroes, particularly in the South, still breed carelessly and disastrously, with the result that the increase among Negroes, even more than among whites, is from that portion of the population least intelligent and fit. Number 6. Birth control appeals to the advanced radical because it is calculated to undermine the authority of the Christian churches. I look forward to seeing humanity free someday of the tyranny of Christianity, no less than capitalism. Number 7. Every single case of inherited defect, every malformed child, every congenitally tainted human being brought into this world is of infinite importance to that poor individual. But it is scarcely less important to the rest of us and to all of our children who must pay in one way or another for these biological and racial mistakes. Number 8. It now remains for the United States government to set a sensible example to the world by offering a bonus or a yearly pension to all obviously unfit parents who allow themselves to be sterilized by harmless and scientific means. Margaret Sanger, the woman heralded by the Democrats and left-wing ideologues in the United States for her positions on women's reproductive rights, always failed to include her genocidal positions on ethnic cleansing. She died on September 6, 1966 in Tucson, Arizona. But Margaret Sanger was not alone. The late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said in a New York Times interview, "Frankly, I had thought that at the time Roe was decided, there was concern about population growth, and particularly growth in populations that we don't want to have too many of." In Elle magazine, Ginsburg also stated that poor people should have ready access to abortions because it makes no sense as a national policy to promote birth only among poor people. In 2015,
See, this is exactly the thing that makes me crazy about super liberal agenda, the super liberal agenda, and super liberal people. A lot of the people that they herald as heroes, right, are evil. I'm sorry to say that, but that's truly my belief in my heart. People like this, people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, don't even get me started on the Clintons, don't even get me started on Biden. I mean, they want to pick apart things people like Trump say, right? They want to twist his words or cut out a certain portion to make him seem like the racist white devil. Yet, here are people that they look up to and herald and praise being literal examples for the Nazis. This is the hypocrisy of the left to the extreme. I gave like 6 examples of it in my stream the other day, but this is one of the most extreme examples, right? These people are heroes to the radical left, yet were it up to them, they would have exterminated everyone but who they thought, for whatever reason, were the best and most wanted people in society. That's crazy to me.
Out of $1.29 billion in total revenue, $553.7 million came from the government reimbursing Planned Parenthood for their services. In 2020, Planned Parenthood performed 383,460 abortions, the highest number of abortions it has yet reported, and an increase of nearly 28,600 from the previous year. And in the United States, the abortion rate for black women is almost 5 times that for white women. In July 2020, Planned Parenthood quietly removed Margaret Sanger's name from its headquarters in Manhattan, New York. Obviously, the Times had caught up with Margaret Sanger. Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please click like.
So, that was the first video. Now, the second video, thanks babe. The second video, thank you, Jack, and thank you all for being here today. Like I said, I really do think that this is important. This subject is really important. I would like to believe a lot of people on the radical left are uninformed of some of this truth. And I know for a fact people on the radical left are given bite-sized, watered-down, sugar-coated nuggets of truth when it comes to abortion, right? Well, from an ex-abortionist, now pro-life advocate, which is what this video is going to be, we're really going to learn truly what abortion is at every stage of the game. We're going to see instruments used. We're going to see very graphic recreations. So this is your one and only content warning, trigger warning. If you have some type of trauma related to abortion or the medical industry in general, or anything that could be related to something you might hear an abortionist talk about, you might want to go ahead and exit stage left, and I love you so much and thank you for being here. Because this is not going to be a pretty video, but I really feel like everyone who consents to an abortion should have to watch this video before they do it. Because it's a very important video. It's 8 years old. I don't know how it doesn't have billions of views. Just one second. Darling, no ma'am. Sorry, kids be crazy. I really think this should have 50 billion views. I don't know how it doesn't have more views. Ecclesia Muskoki is the channel. It's up here in the top left here. I believe it might be some type of university. I didn't deep dive into the actual channel that produced it. But like I said, super important. Thank you, Mount Mama. I'm so glad that you're here. I really, like I said, I watched a whole different, my history is nothing but abortionists and abortion survivors and abortion facts right now, because from yesterday and today I've really been trying to handpick a few videos. My goal was to make this live an hour or less, like kind of bite-size, almost podcast length, but not crazy. You know, something you could watch on your way to work, or, you know, just something you might could send to someone and have them actually want to sit down and watch it without being completely overwhelmed, have some facts, have some truth in their face, maybe be able to plant that seed. That's the goal. And so I'm truly honored that you guys have joined me, and I'm glad that you're here, and thank you for your input as well. Like I said, trigger warning, this one gets a little ugly. It's not too incredibly graphic because it's just recreations, but it's also not pretty.
My name is Dr. Anthony Levatino. I'm a practicing obstetrician gynecologist, and I performed over 1,200 abortions. First, I'm going to describe a first trimester medical abortion. This is a procedure in which the mother swallows pills in order to terminate her baby, and it is performed up to the 9th week of pregnancy. The procedure involves 2 steps. Step 1. At the abortion clinic or doctor's office, the woman takes pills which contain mifepristone, also called RU46. RU46 blocks the action of a hormone called progesterone. Progesterone is naturally produced in the mother's body to stabilize the lining of the uterus. When RU46 blocks progesterone, the lining of the mother's uterus breaks down, cutting off blood and nourishment to the baby, who then dies inside the mother's womb. It is important to note that even after it has been taken, it is possible to reverse the effects of RU46 and save the baby if progesterone is administered. The sooner, the better. Step 2. 24 to 48 hours after taking RU46, the woman takes misoprostol, also called Cytotec, that is administered either orally or vaginally. RU46 and misoprostol together cause severe cramping, contractions, and often heavy bleeding to force the dead baby out of the woman's uterus. The process can be very intense and painful, and the bleeding and contractions can last from a few hours to several days. While she could lose her baby anytime and anywhere during this process, the woman will often sit on a toilet as she prepares to expel the child, which she will then flush. She may even see her dead baby within the pregnancy sac. At 9 weeks, for example, the baby will be almost an inch long, and if she looks carefully, she might be able to count the fingers and toes. After she has disposed of her baby, the woman may have bleeding and spotting for several weeks. Bleeding lasts, on average, 9 to 16 days. 8% of women bleed more than 30 days, and 1% require hospitalization because of heavy bleeding. RU46 is only FDA approved for the first 7 weeks of pregnancy. While RU46 can be used off-label up to 9 weeks, the failure rate increases as the pregnancy progresses. At 7 weeks,
also, I do just want a quick caveat. Want to mention, like I said, this was made 8 years ago, so I'm sure maybe the drugs have changed, maybe the procedure has changed slightly, at least this part of the procedure, but it's the later stages that I'm more concerned about. And I also just wanted to show, spoiler alert, this guy is now a pro-life activist. It kind of ruins the last little part of it, but I I think it's important because I had a lot of seething anger and like hatred toward this man, the way he kept he referred to babies as babies, and the way he speaks about the process seems so cold to me, thinking that he was just continuously doing abortions. So I hope to maybe ease your mind a little if you're having those same thoughts, that the surprise at the end is that he's now a pro-life activist. So he's really trying to spread a message of hope and love, and I feel like it probably took a lot for him to even do this. So if you have any of that judgment or hatred in your mind, kind of put that to the back until the end, because I know I had that, and I had to watch it again, which is enough to turn your stomach, just to really be able to take it in.
It has a 5% failure
Yo, I'm glad to see you, darling. Hello.
rate. At 8 weeks, an 8% failure rate, and at 9 weeks, a 10% failure rate. If failure occurs, she will usually be offered a surgical abortion.
Oh, Lord. Okay, Mama.
For the mother, medical abortion often causes abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headache, and heavy bleeding. Maternal deaths have occurred, most frequently due to infection and undiagnosed ectopic pregnancy. First trimester surgical abortion called suction DNC, dilatation and curettage. This is the most frequently performed abortion and is used typically from 5 to 13 weeks of pregnancy. After administering anesthesia, the abortionist uses a speculum like this. This is placed inside the vagina and opened using this screw on the side, allowing the abortionist to see the cervix, the entrance to the uterus. The cervix acts as a gate that stays closed for the duration of pregnancy, protecting the baby until it is ready for birth. The abortionist uses a series of metal rods called dilators, like these, which increase in thickness, and inserts them into the cervix to dilate it, gaining access to the inside of the uterus where the baby resides. The baby has a heartbeat, fingers, toes, arms, and legs, but its bones are still weak and fragile. The abortionist takes a suction catheter like this one. This is a 14 French suction catheter. It's clear plastic, about 9 inches long, and it has a hole through the center. It is inserted through the cervix into the uterus. The suction machine is then turned on with a force 10 to 20 times more powerful than your household vacuum cleaner. The baby is rapidly torn apart by the force of the suction and squeezed through this tubing down into the suction machine, followed by the placenta. Though the uterus is mostly emptied at this point, one of the risks of a suction DNC is incomplete abortion. Essentially, pieces of the baby or placenta left behind. This can lead to infection or bleeding. In an attempt to prevent this, the abortionist uses a curette to scrape the lining of the uterus. A curette is basically a long-handled curved blade. Once the uterus is empty, the speculum is removed and the abortion is complete. The risks of suction DNC include perforation or laceration of the uterus or cervix, potentially damaging intestine, bladder, and nearby blood vessels, hemorrhage, infection, and in rare instances, even death. Future pregnancies are also at a greater risk for loss or premature delivery due to abortion-related trauma and injury to the cervix. Second trimester surgical abortion called dilatation and evacuation, or D&E. A D&E is performed between 13 and 24 weeks of pregnancy. After administering anesthesia, the abortionist uses a weighted speculum, like this one, that opens the vagina widely. Because second trimester babies are so large, this greater access facilitates a late-term abortion. Late-term abortion requires that the cervix be prepared 24 to 48 hours in advance with laminaria. Laminaria is a type of sterilized seaweed that absorbs water over 8 to 12 hours and swells to several times its original diameter. Once removed, metal dilators can be used to further open the cervix as needed. Once the cervix has been stretched open, the suction tube is placed inside. A baby at 20 weeks gestation is as big as the length of my hand, from head to rump, not counting the legs. The suction machine is turned on, and pale yellow amniotic fluid surrounding the baby is suctioned out through the catheters. With babies this big, They don't fit through catheters this size. The baby's bones and skull are too strong to be torn apart by suction alone. This is a
See, nobody really wants to listen to this, right? Because this is the nasty truth that the left does not want people to understand. When people like the pro-life movement generally, I won't even name any names, but a bunch of the people who go to campuses and debate people, etc., when they mention that babies are dismembered in a second trimester and later abortion, that's not some type of exaggeration, right? That's not hyperbole. As you're about to learn, that is quite literally what they have to do.
clamp. A Sofer clamp is made of stainless steel. It's about 13 inches long. The business end is about 2.5 inches long and a half-inch wide, and there are rows of sharp teeth. This is a grasping instrument. When it gets a hold of something, it does not let go. The abortionist uses this clamp to grasp an arm or leg. Once he has a firm grip, the abortionist pulls hard in order to tear the limb from the baby's body. One by one, the rest of the limbs are removed, along with the intestines, the spine, and the heart and lungs. Usually the most difficult part of the procedure is extracting the baby's head, which is about the size of a large plum at 20 weeks. The head is grasped and crushed. The abortionist knows he has crushed the skull when a white substance comes out of the cervix. This was the baby's brains. The abortionist then removes skull pieces. He removes the placenta and any leftover parts of the baby with a curette, scraping the lining of the uterus for any remaining tissue.
Thank you for being here, Leo. And it is. It's horrible. It's disgusting. It's demonic, in my own personal opinion. Here's what I believe, though. I believe, and I totally understand that you're out, Leo, and I love you so much. It won't be this in the next live. I promise. And love you so much for coming in. If you send this to a friend who is pro-choice, and they can't make it through this video, I believe they have no damn business being pro-choice. And that's just my own opinion. I think, like I said, anyone who is gearing up to or considering getting an abortion should have to watch this. Not for the reason to guilt them. That's not what my point is. I truly believe, because I would like to believe, that people are inherently good. And I do know that the radical left is fed lies and sugar-coated nuggets of truth. Like I said, they're told that these are not babies, that they're just clumps of cells, etc. And they're not really explained this process, right? And in fact, when it's put in their face, a lot of them deny it. And I believe, because I believe that people are inherently good, if they truly knew this was the honest, ugly, honest truth of it, that perhaps they would not encourage such demonic, terrible things. Like I said, I'm trying not to use hateful language because I really want this to be something even pro-choice people will be able to watch, and it can plant a seed. But I don't know what else to call intentionally dismembering a child in the womb but evil and demonic. There's no other words I can use to describe it. So, there's that. Yeah, I agree, Jack. And this is animated, that's correct. You know? And it still makes me feel ill. So, like I said, I believe people who sign up to have, especially later term abortions, not that any length of pregnancy is less valid, or any term of abortion is okay, but the further along the pregnancy gets, the more ugly it gets, right? And the more graphic it gets. And if there's gonna be a line, there definitely needs to be. I don't believe there should be. We'll go into maybe a moral discussion of it and a legal discussion of it later, but my own personal opinion is the line should be, if you get pregnant, you have a child. And that's just my personal opinion. And we can get into a little bit later how I think legally it should be handled, but that's my moral compass. Yes, we do have a word for it, and it's called murder. That's correct, Leo. That's exactly correct. And at the rate that it's happening, I would call that genocide. Or mass murder at the very least. And I don't think that that's some kind of hyperbole either.
The abortionist then collects the baby parts and reassembles them to make sure that there are 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. Once all the parts have been accounted for, the abortion is complete. For the woman, this procedure carries a significant risk of major complications, including perforation or laceration of the uterus or cervix, with possible damage to the bowel, bladder, and other maternal organs. Infection and hemorrhage can also occur, which can even lead to death. Future pregnancies are also at greater risk for loss or premature delivery due to abortion-related trauma and injury to the cervix. Finally, I'm going to describe a third trimester induced abortion, which is performed at 25 weeks to term. At this point, the baby is almost fully developed and viable, meaning he or she could survive outside the womb if the mother were to go into labor prematurely. Because the baby...
And really important caveat here. I see your comment. You were going to drive into town for breakfast, not so hungry anymore, Leo. I'm sorry. I totally understand. And, in this caveat here, like I said, this was 8 years ago, and you have 25 weeks in utero, born at 26 weeks, but within the past few years, medical advancements have been astounding, okay? There have been many babies born at 22 weeks. I met a few at the NICU when my son had to be in there, who survive every day. And there have been 2 babies as of now, or as of a few, maybe like 2 weeks ago, when I had last researched this, that were born and survived outside of the womb at 20 weeks. So 8 years ago when this was made, it was believed that babies could survive outside of the womb between 25 and 26 weeks. Medical advancements have made it to somewhere between 20 and 22 weeks is an acceptable range, wide range, not every now and again. These are stories that have happened. 22 weeks and further continue to happen, right? So now we know it's even earlier. No, ma'am. Nope. Sorry, y'all. And, so that's even sooner, right? And again, that's a whole thing that we can go into about adoption, but I just wanted to make that caveat very clear as well, that women have these super late term abortions when even at 20 weeks. Now, we know a baby absolutely can and has survived outside of the womb. I understand, Leo. Totally understand. Like I said, it won't be this next live, and I love you so much. Yes, I had to be induced and deliver both my babies, and both of them were jaundice and had a short NICU stay. And I saw all kinds of babies there that were born early. I think the earliest, maybe 22 or 23 weeks was the earliest I saw. Tiny babies that their entire body, head and feet included, could fit in the palm of your hand. And, like I said, medical advancements have been astounding. And even if there's some sort of problem, risk to the mother's life, etc., if you're past that 20-week mark, I still don't believe there's any reason for an abortion. A lot of people call me heartless for it, but as we're soon going to learn, as I already knew, if you were to lose a baby at that stage, or if you were to have an abortion at that stage in pregnancy, either way, you're going to have to deliver a dead baby. That's the ugly truth of it. Another ugly truth the left does not want you to know. You can't just dismember or suck out a 20-week-old baby. We're way beyond that at this point. Yeah, 3 pounds, 4 ounces. Well, God bless him, Mountain Mama. And I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you again for being here with us today.
So large and developed, this procedure takes 3 or 4 days to complete. On day 1, the abortionist uses a large needle to inject a drug called digoxin. Digoxin is generally used to treat heart problems, but a high enough dosage of digoxin will cause fatal cardiac arrest. The abortionist inserts the needle with the digoxin through the woman's abdomen or through her vagina and into the baby, targeting either the head, torso, or heart. The baby will feel it. Babies at this stage feel pain. When the needle pierces the baby's body and the digoxin takes effect, the life of the baby will end. The abortionist then inserts multiple sticks of seaweed called laminaria into the woman's cervix. They will slowly open up the cervix for delivery of a stillborn baby. While the woman waits for the laminaria to dilate her cervix, she carries her dead baby inside of her for 2 to 3 days. On day 2, the abortionist replaces the laminaria and may perform a second ultrasound to ensure the baby is dead. If the child is still alive, he administers another lethal dose of digoxin. The woman then goes back to where she is staying while her cervix continues to dilate. If she goes into labor and is unable to make it to the clinic in time, she will give birth at home or in a hotel. In this case, she may be advised to deliver her baby into a bathroom toilet. The abortionist then comes to remove the baby and clean up. If she can make it to the clinic, she will do so during her severest contractions and deliver her dead son or daughter. If the baby does not come out whole, then the procedure becomes a D&E, a dilation and evacuation, and the abortionist uses clamps and forceps to dismember the baby, piece by piece. Once the placenta and all the body parts have been removed, the abortion is complete. Late-term abortions have a high risk of hemorrhage, lacerations, and uterine perforations, as well as a risk of maternal death. Future pregnancies are also at a greater risk for loss or premature delivery due to abortion-related trauma and injury to the cervix. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm Dr. Anthony Levatino, and in the early part of my career as an OBGYN, I performed over 1,200 abortions. One day, after completing one of those abortions, I looked at the remains of a preborn child whose life I had ended, and all I could see was someone's son or daughter. I came to realize that killing a baby at any stage of pregnancy for any reason is wrong. I want you to know today, no matter where you're at or what you've done, you can change. Make a decision today to protect the preborn. Thank you for your time.
It's a hard video to watch, and I've watched it a few times, and it still makes me incredibly emotional. Because there are doctors, many doctors, I've heard many testimonies who are OBGYNs and abortionists until one day, for one reason or another, they're impacted and it becomes personal, right? And they really see the truth for what it is. And I can't imagine being that doctor, right? And really coming to the realization that you're a murderer. That must really shake your whole sense of humanity and yourself to the core, right? And I find it a little harder to sympathize with the abortionists because I feel logically they know exactly what they're doing, even if their morals have not caught up. But it's really those seeking abortions that we want to target, right? Because if it weren't for them, supply demand, right? And there are so many resources. All you have to do is a quick Google search. And as a matter of fact, I'll throw some resources into the description once this video becomes a VOD. There are pregnancy resource centers. There's a whole system, a safety net system, even separate from welfare. There's WIC. There's so much help out there. And there's no reason for anyone to take the life of their child because they don't think they could financially afford it, or because it will impact their lifestyle, because there are mile-long waiting lists for children. There are waiting lists for children with Down syndrome, with heart defects, children who have a death sentence the moment they're born because of rare conditions. There are wait lists for people who are called specifically to care for those types of children. No child has to die or be unloved or alone in this world. There's just simply no excuse. Hi, Larry. How you doing, darling? So glad to see you. And I so appreciate those of you who stuck around with me this long, because I realize that, especially that second video, it is a hard watch. And it's really terrifying. This particular doctor, I saw him on another panel. I'll link a couple videos that he's in, because like I said, he's a huge pro-life activist today, praise be to God. And he talks, and I actually made it a short and put it in my post section earlier. It said like, hey y'all, we got to talk about this. And I clipped like a minute long clip of him talking in a larger video. And he was saying that they're more likely than the numbers we hear, right? They're more like 1 million or more abortions every year because he thinks he did around 1,200. However, of those 1,200, only about 200 were done at a hospital and required a death certificate and to be reported. The other 1,000 he did in his private practice, right? And never had to report them to any bureau or governing party. So imagine that were to be the case for every abortionist in America, right? How much do we think the numbers would really climb if we understood the fact that 500 times more happen than we think? It's staggering to think about. It really is. And it's really disconcerting that a lot of the people I see pushing this agenda are the exact types of people Margaret Sanger would have been putting the first in line to have abortions or to be aborted, right? And so, anyways, moral of the story is that I really just wanted to make. I never had seen any kind of content like the video I'm trying to make right now out there in the world, where somebody went through the history of Margaret Sanger, which is really the history of abortion, at least as readily available as it is in the United States. Not so much anymore, again, praise be to God, but once upon a time, not long ago. And what really is abortion, right? Because the far lefts and the way liberals would want you to believe you just take a pill or get a shot, or maybe they have the vacuum and you don't ever feel a thing, and it's just a clump of cells anyway, right? You don't want to ruin your party lifestyle, or maybe you already had a high risk pregnancy and you should not risk your life for a baby you don't even want, quote unquote, right? And it would really be my hope, even if this reaches one person and makes them reconsider, I will feel like I did something. Because I think they want us to be fighting over every little thing, and race and politics and this and that. This is one of the major issues impacting our world today. In my mind, top three. Maybe the very top, other than our fight between good and evil that's happening every day right out in the open, right? Okay, I have an answer, Larry. A great stream. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, Mountain Mama. I so appreciate you being here and your input. And I would love for you to tell me your story one day. Maybe we can do a co-stream or something, or a little mini interview. That would be really great. I so appreciate it. Yeah, I think this is a major problem in our society. The doctor that do these abortions, do they get awarded for the abortions they do? Well, I know financially they get awarded. There was the Margaret Sanger Award for basically some of the biggest proponents of abortion. They weren't all abortionists, but they stopped giving it out as soon as BLM got involved with Planned Parenthood. But do you mean financially? Because the guy, like I said, the guy that was doing this piece of content right here, he is a huge pro-life activist. He talked many, many times about his experience as an abortionist, and he said in private abortions, where he was at his private practice, he made upwards of $800 in 15 minutes that went into his pocket every single time he performed an abortion, and that he really pocketed, like once you take into account the equipment and everything, 700 or more every single time for 15 minutes, right? And so, are they awarded financially? For certain. In other ways, who knows? I know they won't be awarded on Judgment Day. I know that. Which I give no judgment to anyone. That's not my job. I, really struggle. I know God forgives all sins. I just really struggle to see where you go from there, no matter how much good you do in the world. However, I do believe that there's some credit due for trying to correct that wrong and trying to make some kind of reparation in a society you've robbed of 1,200 people. And there, I mean, I've heard other abortionists, there are lifelong, career long abortionists I've heard speak who claim they did nearly 10,000 abortions. There's one lady, I can't remember her name, I'll see if I can find her and link her in the description as well, who said she's a huge pro-life activist at this point. She said she does it for her children because at this point she realizes her soul's damned to hell and she can never do a thing about it, no matter how much good she does in the world, because she murdered 10,000 people and she'll never be forgiven. I don't know if that's true. I'm not God. It's not up to me to decide. I know I would struggle very hard. I can't imagine. Or there are repercussions for the abortions. Do we not have a law against abortion? Sorry, I live under a rock. You don't have to apologize, Larry. That's a great question. Today, there are many states who are making anti-abortion legislation. It's not national at this point. That when Roe versus Wade happened, which is what everybody was griping about months ago, it basically said women have a constitutional right to an abortion, which is when abortion basically became legal. However, before Roe versus Wade, that was on the national level. Before Roe versus Wade, it was on a state-to-state level where they decided, hey, you know, I'm in East Tennessee. Our morals are strong. We're near the Bible Belt. We don't believe in that. In New York, they might feel different, right? State to state decided what was right for their state. I question whether or not it should be federal, whether there should. Here's my only thing with abortion legislation, right? Is it's always the quote unquote slippery slope once you bring the government into it, right? I don't believe abortions are right. Whether I believe that the government should come in and decide what happens, I'm not so sure. Because anytime the government has its hands in something, it goes awry, right? So I don't know who would be the quote unquote moral police over abortion, but I don't know that making laws for or against it is the solution either. I know morally where I stand. Politically, it's a little bit more gray. And, but yeah, to answer your question, in some states, yes, there absolutely are laws against abortion, more and more every day, but not on a national level anymore since they overturned Roe versus Wade, which I do believe should have been done because I don't believe that the Constitution lays out a right to an abortion. That sounds kind of crazy to me, truth be told. In fact, the Constitution guarantees all of us humans human rights, at least American citizens, and humans are humans before they're born. So, there's that. Thanks, Devil. Thanks and welcome, welcome. So glad to have you. So as I said, that's all we have for this right this second. I'm thinking of making a part 2 that deals with the legalities of it. I need to do a little bit more research on that as well. I'd like to gather a list of states that have made legislation, etc. Maybe a little more information on Roe versus Wade. I do know Margaret Sanger, of course. I can't believe we didn't mention it in the video now that I think about it, but Roe versus Wade was actually also a very a little pet project, if you will, of Margaret Sanger, right? Who's surprised? Nobody, right? So yeah, I'd definitely like to do a part 2 of the legalities of it. This more so was just meant to target the morality side, right? And just simply the ugly truth of it. I feel like people should know what they're getting themselves into if they are considering to have an abortion. And they're, for one, putting money in the pockets of people who promote racism and eugenics and genocide. And for two, in my personal opinion, committing a sin that goes along side by side with numbers that happen every day, sadly, the mass murder of the most innocent citizens in our world, the unborn or preborn. Rick, welcome, welcome. 5 months and younger. I don't know if you just came in, Rick, but earlier we have just watched a video that details the way abortions are done through like first and second and third trimesters, and it's really ugly. And 5 months is crazy because that's that 20-week mark. That's when babies have lived outside of the womb. They have fingernails, they have eyelashes, they have a heartbeat, all their organs are formed, their lungs can't completely work on their own, which is why a lot of them have to be in the NICU and be oxygenated. They can't open their eyes for a few weeks usually, but they can absolutely live outside of the womb. They are sentient, they feel pain, as the abortionist pointed out. And I think also watching that video with him being very factual and giving you ugly truth, like the needle is inserted into the baby and the baby feels the pain. The baby feels everything at this stage. I think that's really important because I've never seen such an honest recollection of events, of how things happen. I think that was also very important. Nope. 20 weeks, Rick. We now had 2 babies in the United States who have survived outside of the womb at 20 weeks. 2 now. Before, the goalpost was 22 weeks. We had many, many babies at 22. I believe there were even a few at 21, but the 22 was the big thing. But now, as of now, we've had 2 babies that survived outside of the womb at 20 weeks in the United States. So that will soon become the new goalpost, I'm sure. I think that's still far too late. I think any of them are, but yeah, it's a whole ugly fact and thing. and thank you guys for joining me today. Like I said, I really do appreciate, especially those of you that stuck around, like my mama, and I know Jack was here for a bit, through even the ugliest parts. I so appreciate you. And I don't know if Andy's still around. He was here for a bit too. And if you have not seen the first part, if you can stomach it, go through. The first part was Margaret Sanger. The second part was graphic recreations of exactly what happens during abortion. I'm gonna go ahead and get off of here now because the kids have returned from hanging out with Papa, and we gotta have some lunch and get them ready for naps. And I'm gonna love all my babies a little extra harder today. Oh, you're saying the time frame is 5 months, aka 22 weeks. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna do some research on that too, because I wonder about the US's laws versus the world's, like other countries. It doesn't affect me if it's in another country, but I find it interesting to kind of compare and contrast. Thank you, and thank you, Mountain Mama, for being here with me the whole time. It's insane to me too, Rick. It really means a lot to me. And we'll have another part 2 sometime soon, and dig into more of the legalities part of it and all that. But thank you for being here with me today. And it'll be a VOD any moment, and it's just over an hour, so it's not ridiculous. And you can tell them they don't even have to watch the last 10 minutes because it's just me talking, or the first 3 or 4. So under an hour. There we go. And thank you so much again. Love you guys so much. We'll see you again. All right. And blessed be to y'all.